Welcome to Black Writer Therapy, the podcast where Black women writers come to heal, share, and be their most unapologetic Black woman writer selves. I'm your host and unlicensed therapist, Ella Shawn, and I'm excited you decided to spend this hour with us. Whether you're joining for the first time or you're a returning listener, this is your space to explore the art of storytelling, find inspiration, and connect with a community of bold and brilliant Black women writers. In this session of Black Writer Therapy, I welcome Dr. Katrina Hutchins, a scholar, coach, and thought leader specializing in the power of women's voices. Dr. Katrina's groundbreaking research and her latest book, The Voice Positioning System, 7 Ways to Harness Your Power and Master Your Influence, serve as the foundation for this transformative conversation about voice, positioning, personal growth, and cultivating influence. As always, we'll keep it unapologetic, insightful, and empowering.
Dr. Katrina Hutchins, Ella will see you now.
Hi, and thank you so much, Dr. Katrina, for joining us today, coming in to sit on my proverbial couch here on Black Writer Therapy. How are you?
I am doing well, and it's such an honor to be here. I am celebrating the fact that you have this platform, that I have this opportunity to sit on your proverbial couch.
You're in good company. I have a question that I ask all of my guests at the very beginning, and it's one of those questions that I never get asked, so I always want to give that courtesy. How are you healing today?
That's a great question. My response is with great gratitude. My healing journey has been challenging, filled with questions and unknowns, coming up against anxiety and fear. But one of the things that I'm always aware of is that there are tremendous gifts that come out of it. I'm healing with great gratitude because I'm embracing the gifts. Even as I grapple with the hard things, I'm embracing the gifts, and that brings me great gratitude.
I had a t-shirt once that said, "Gratitude is my religion." I think it's so important. And you just said something that resonates with me, that even as you're grappling with difficulties, you're also grateful for the gifts that come from it. I developed lupus maybe 13 years ago. I don't even remember because it's not what I focus on. But I always tell them it was the greatest gift that I have ever been given is to have this disease. And I don't make light of it because it's difficult, but the gifts that have come from it. Thank you for saying that. I love that approach.
Absolutely. I think great gifts come out of adversity. Sometimes we have to be open to see them. They can be hidden in plain sight, but when we look, they are there.
Indeed. I love that. For the listening audience, tell them a little bit about yourself and a little bit about this book.
So I'll start with this, as I always start, because I'm so proud of this. I'm a country girl. I grew up in the country, living around all of my relatives. And so I had a really happy-go-lucky little girl experience. And, that has just kind of been foundational for me. So I have a great appreciation for fitness. I have a great appreciation for relationship and the lessons I learned as a little girl, one of which was the catalyst for the book when I didn't even know it. It's actually the introduction of the book, so I don't want to give that away. But I tell that story. It's a story of a childhood experience that caused me to lose my voice. I experienced, kind of my young life, maybe my preteen life into early adulthood life, not understanding the power of my voice from one simple incident. As a child, I had an opportunity to do research around this notion of silence, especially with women. And so the book emerged out of my own experiences. I think that's what I enjoyed the most about writing the voice positioning system. It had a mixture of research and lived experiences. If I'm reading a self-help book, I love to hear the information, but I also want to hear how it helped the author. This was so therapeutic for me to even be able to put pen to paper out of my lived experiences, plus my scholarly research, because it felt like a scholar practitioner approach to writing the book.
Wow, that's really interesting. You're my first self-help book author.
Oh my. Yay.
So I know you're
That.
elevating my show. Thank you, Dr. Katrina.
Well, thank you for bringing this. And I'm so honored to be able to be the first to do that.
I'm excited. I don't write self-help. I'm a fiction writer and a poet. I think like being able to write a book that's not only here, let me give you some skills and tools that are going to facilitate your healing and growth, but also let me do it in a way that doesn't bore you to tears and makes you want to pull your hair out. I wouldn't have that issue as I have no hair, but I've read some self-help books that are like when the author has lived experiences that inform the research and inform and necessitates the tools that are being provided, then it becomes more narrative and creative, like nonfiction. And that I absolutely love reading. And so is that kind of the feedback you've gotten from your books, that it reads more like narrative nonfiction?
It does. And I've gotten that feedback because I think what readers are able to do, or so I'm told, is that they're able to identify themselves in the book, even through the research, because I interviewed other women. So those voices show up in the book. And not just women. I've had men read the book as well and be able to make the connection to this sense of voice power and what it means to harness the power of our voices so that we can master our influence in the world. And so that's what has set at the core. And many people, although their stories may be different, certainly their experiences are different, but the power of voice is the same. Research shows that only 7% of our communication happens in words. The other 93% is what we don't speak verbally. It is our attitude, it's our demeanor, it's our disposition, it's the energy we bring with them. It's the thing that people feel when we walk in a room. Thing that we've left people with when we leave the room. We're always speaking, even when we're not using words. The book calls us to be aware of what people hear when they see us. What do people hear when they see us? And that's so important. And it pulls us out of that way of believing or even thinking. I've heard so many people say, I don't care what people think about me. Well, we should, right? We should. And I say that because you do want to leave or have an impact, an impression, something that you're giving people by your very presence. Otherwise, why are you even there? Why are you showing up? If you don't want your presence to have meaning, if you don't want your presence to bring value, then why are you there? So we have to care. We have to care. That is the premise of the book and why I believe readers can find themselves in the pages of these books, because we all have voice, whether we recognize it or not.
I could literally just sit here and listen to you talk. I learned. That's one of the reasons I wanted to do this podcast, to learn. If you were my professor, you would be like, oh, we love her.
I do love takers. I do.
I find this fascinating because you opened with like 93% of all communication is nonverbal.
Mm-hmm.
As a writer, as a publisher, as a writing coach and editor, that is one of the biggest things that I say to clients, to other writers, to whomever. Isn't the only thing that your reader is reading. And so when we speak of voice as in the writing world, like that's a big part of it. All of that subtle nuance, mood, tone, energy that you are putting into the work that you're not writing, but it's there. And so when you spoke about you walk into the room and you've already said a million things to a million people, and it's all different for every.
Have you ever been sitting in a room and a person walked in and they didn't say a word, but in the back of your head, you heard, wah, wah. And it's because of how they came in the room, what they brought in the room with them. It was speaking. When I'm doing workshops or if I'm coaching around voice, I always ask, what is it about a blinking billboard? And I always say, I don't like blinking billboards. I just don't. And the answer or my why as to not liking them is because by the time you get through one message that it's trying to convey, it's changed to something else.
Yes.
If we are walking billboards, it behooves us to not be a blinking one, right? Having this sense of voice power and voice identity keeps us from changing messages before a person can get to know the message that we are. Being able to have this sense of voice power and standing in our creative voice gives us an opportunity to show up in our most authentic way and to show up whole. When we don't have this strong sense of voice, we tend to fragment because we buy into the notion that we've got to leave parts of our voices at these proverbial doors. And one day we wake up and we recognize we are less than whole because we've left so many pieces at so many doors that we don't even know how to be whole anymore. I tell people all the time, keep your pieces because we need to show up in whole voice, all of our 7% and all of our 93, not fragmented, but whole.
So what do you say to these people who say, yeah, but when I'm in this room, I have to speak this way, I have to present this way, and I have to do the whole code switching thing. And, I can't show up as all of this because all of this might be a bit much in this room. What do you say to those women who feel like I got to shrink down in some spaces?
I say remove the I've got to, right? I've got to sounds like a burden. I've got to sounds like something that we wear as a garment. I've got to sounds like a to-do. And I always say, change your I've got to I get to. I get to choose how I show up. I get to choose how to have the honor of bringing my voice to this table, not from an arrogant, conceited, or superior place, but because I know what I bring. I know the value that I bring. I know that I am a carrier of light. I know that I am a carrier of life. And because I get to do it, I can associate it with honor as opposed to I have to. When I recognize that I get to, it keeps me authentic. When I feel like I have to, I feel like I'm at the mercy of everybody else. But when I recognize the power of my get to, I bring honor.
I need to get a bill from you. Like this, this is probably one of my favorite sessions to date,
Oh,
and it's just starting.
I'm
I
so,
could,
so glad.
wow, it is amazing how you are framing this. I deal with voice all the time, Dr. Katrina, not just in writing, but helping authors find their speaking voices as well, because a lot of authors, we are really kind of in our heads 24/7,
Sure. Sure.
in other worlds. And so we may not be as comfortable speaking in front of people or doing presentations and things like that. Even speaking about our art becomes something very difficult for a lot of writers. And this concept of, I got to go in here and talk about this book, just the change, right? That's like one letter. So powerful.
You know, that changes everything. Do you see how I have to becomes kind of this heaviness that we wear
Mhm.
versus I get to, right?
Yeah.
Restores us to that place of value. Value.
Of agency, like it
Emphasize
gives
absolutely.
agency.
It gives agency. It gives agency.
That's one of those things. Now you're speaking in an active voice as opposed to a passive one. It's that big of a difference.
Very good analogy. If we lean into that, when we think about harnessing the power of our voices, it is turning away from that passive voice, that passive approach to how we show up and living in the present tense,
Mhm.
right? Living in the present tense.
You're speaking to my English teacher.
Not even third person, but
Mhm.
just living in the here and now and maximizing moments, right? Maximizing moments. And so when I think about there is a difference between using our voices, and this is what I write about in the book, the difference between using our voices, because we all have the capacity to use our voices, but I talk about in the book the power of positioning our voices. Positioning has with it critical thought, strategy, the power of pausing. It has that opportunity for us to think about how to respond as opposed to how we react. There is a distinct difference. That positioning of voice gives opportunity for us to be in alignment with ourselves. I talk about being misaligned with the power of our voice could also be the reason why we have a hard time saying no,
Yes.
because we don't understand the power of our voice. We're misaligned with our own power act when we are not aware of our power. Someone might say to me, "Hey, can you come over and wash my car, clean the house, do the lawn, all of those kinds of things?" There could be everything on the inside of me screaming, no.
Mhm.
But my 7% and my 93 will violate my own no and give you a yes.
This Miss Dr. Katrina, the word choice here, violate.
When we don't understand the power of our voice, we will do to ourselves what we would never allow others to do to us. We violate ourselves, we diminish, we devalue, we do all the things that we wouldn't allow others to do, but we do it to ourselves when we are misaligned with our voice power, when we are misaligned with that creative power, we wreak havoc upon ourselves.
These words are visceral, okay? And I need to just say they are visceral and violent. If I am hearing you correctly, we turn inward on
Mhm.
ourselves when we don't align with our voice, when we don't align with the power, when we are just out here living La Vida Loca and not standing in our own strength. I have not heard anyone talk about voice in this way. When I skimmed through the book, I haven't had a chance to read it all yet. So your words are so deliberate and intentional. And I love to regale my guests with this definition. There's this medical definition of intention, and it's the healing process of a wound. When I read that, I was like, oh, well, that's the only definition I'm going to ever apply to this word. Your words are so healing. And they heal wounds that live in the 93% of us.
Mm-hmm. I
Does
love
that make sense?
So often we are dysfunctional because our 93% has suffered the most trauma. When we go back to being little, we have heard messages like children should be seen and not heard. We hear things like stay in a child's place. We hear things like, in my culture, stay out of grown folks' business. We hear things like speak only when you're spoken to, right? When we think about it, that was trauma to our voice's soul, right? That was trauma to our soul, because what we were really being taught is your voice has no power. Your voice only has power when I say it has power. Your voice is only valued when I tell you it's valued. Your voice only has meaning when I say it has meaning. So we grow up with this voice deficit that we bring into workspaces with us, that we bring into relationships with us, that we bring into parenting with us.
Mm-hmm.
We have this voice dysfunction that is perpetuated generationally, because then we start to say what we were taught. We use our 7% to further damage future generations in their 93.
You're taking me there. Like, that's the epigenetics of it.
Absolutely. And so we become these grown-ups with huge voice deficits. Are we still talking? Absolutely. Are we still using? Absolutely. Are we positioning? Absolutely not. Because you cannot position without power. You need power to position, and you need to position in that power, right? So they go hand in hand.
Now, I'm going to ask this age-old question. I know this is probably one of the questions you get asked a lot. Why is it that women, and I am particularly focusing on Black women, hold back from positioning our voices in this power?
Mm-hmm.
What is it?
I believe that, first of all, we are not invited to do it, right? We have, over time, learned voice behavior for our protection and survival. We've not learned voice behavior for thriving. It's been about survival, protection, security, but voice power allows us to thrive. Sometimes we've just not been invited. I hope that the voice positioning system, the book, is an invitation, right? It's not just a self-help or a how-to. I want it to be an invitation. Bring whole voice, to show up in whole voice, to consider whole voice as a lifestyle, not just an event, right? And so I believe that's why we've not had the invitation. So therefore, we hold back, to your point. We buy into the notion that we cannot trust, so we don't. We buy into the fact that we have to not give, so we don't. So there's so many things that sometimes can be embedded culturally. Again, that was learned behavior that we still manifest. right?
I love that. I often speak with writers because I'm my podcast and I have a community of writers. This whole writing game, this whole life game isn't a sum zero game. Like if
Mhm.
one has and someone else comes in that same space, it's not going to take anything away from what you have. And you said we aren't able to trust because of all the other stuff. Maybe we're not even aware that it's a part of who we are, but this lack of trust, like that's something I would love to hear your thoughts on, this lack of trust in Black women, which causes us not to trust ourselves. So we don't trust anyone else. And we begin to pull each other apart as opposed to bringing each other into the fold and lifting each other up. To say that's all tied to a lack or a deficit of voice or trauma within that 93%, like when I say this, it's kind of mind blowing to me.
Absolutely. It's the perpetuation of a narrative. And if we don't change our voice stories, we live in that narrative. And not only do we live in it, we write many narratives out of it, right? So when we have bought into the narrative, I can't trust other Black women, then we co-sign on that narrative and then we create other narratives out of it, right? And we buy into the narrative. I've got mine. They've got to get theirs. We become hoarders of whatever gift, talents, abilities, life and light that we have.
Yeah.
We become hoarders of that as if we somehow own it, and we do not. But we buy into the notion that we have to hoard it. Then we perpetuate that narrative. When we understand the power of this voice identity, our authenticity, we were created to manifest in the world. We were created to show up with light and life in the world. It changes not only our power, it changes our heart. So then we become givers, not hoarders. We recognize that every other Black woman is not our enemy, that she is our sister. She may come to us with flaws, but we come to her with flaws.
Right.
So then we can have an appreciation of our differences, our similarities, our commonalities, those things that make us unique, but they don't become things we are in competition around. They become things that we can have compassion with.
Compassion. That's a word.
Absolutely. So it's shifting competition to compassion. I don't have to compete with her. I can have compassion with her.
I feel like that's the title of your next book. From competition to compassion, because I don't know that people understand the power of compassion. I study yoga, and there's a Sanskrit word called sukha. It basically is the giving of mercy, the giving of grace to self, right? You give it to self because that's important, but to have enough in the overflow that you are able to give mercy and grace, even to and especially to people that you are not connected with. It's a gift to self because that is why we're here. And it's a gift to whomever you're sending this to. It's one of my favorite words. I have it written on a stone at my desk to remind myself, give yourself grace, girl, because life is life. And remember to throw some out there when something comes across your feed and you're like, no, send them some sukha. Don't be that way. And I think that's a lesson that, and Black women, I'm just only talking to us. I'm sure it's a whole heap of other women out there who need to learn. If we could just share some compassion, give some compassion to each other, where would we be?
When we look at, if we were to look up that definition in the dictionary, compassion, it literally means the desire to alleviate distress. when I am clear about my created self, who God has created me to be, when I am clear about what I am to give in the world, then I can look at my sister, another Black woman, and have a desire to alleviate her distress. Even when she may not have that same desire for me.
Right.
It ceases to become transactional and it becomes transformative.
Oh, you
Right?
come with it today. Yes.
It's not transactional, it's transformative. I can have a desire to alleviate your distress, Ella, if you never have the desire to alleviate mine. You not having the desire to do it for me does not diminish who I am. It takes nothing away from me.
Yeah, that's it. And all of this, if we can just walk in the power, in the positioning of our voice. So how do we reclaim that through storytelling? Because the writer in me is like, how are we going to reclaim and reposition, or not even because it's not even positioned in the first place? So how do we reclaim and position the power of our voice storytelling?
We start with telling the story that is true. And we stop telling stories that are fantasy. Sometimes we've created fantasy so that we could survive.
Yeah.
Trauma, heartache, the things that were not. So we created them in our minds. We created narratives as we wanted them to be. I have a dear friend and colleague, Andrea Wise Brown, in Texas, and she is a psychotherapist. We were having a good girlfriend, colleague, psychotherapist conversation, and I was just sharing something with her that I had had years of trepidation over. And I was pouring out my heart to her, and she listened attentively, and she leaned in and said, "Sis, you're going to have to let go of your fantasy so you can live in your reality."
Oh,
So profound. And that's what I will say to your question about the how-to. We have to let go of these fantasies, these false narratives, right? The fictional part of our lives, so we can live in the real story and then do the work to show up in the real story. We have to do the work.
yeah.
I didn't just wake up one day and I all of a sudden understood the power of my voice. That's not how that happened. I had to do the work. I had to come through the darkness of doing this work, the darkness of having lived in voice dysfunction for the larger portion of my life. For some of us, that may be therapy. For some of us, that may be coaching. For some of us, that may be other ways that we find that the work happens for us, but it's the work nonetheless, right? I found myself relying on my faith, to do that work, to realign and reconnecting with the power of God in me, right? So that's my work, to understand that power that lives on the inside of me. So that's what I would say to answer your question. Stepping out of the fantasy, telling ourselves the truth about the fantasy so we can then do the work to live fully and wholly in this reality. And a reality that may not change, right? The storyline of the real narrative may not change, but it does not keep us from living in it nonetheless.
Right. And living in power in it. I think that's
living in power in it.
Yeah, I think that's the important part. I'm sitting here and I'm taking all this in as much as I can, because I'm going to ruminate on this for a while with my notes. When people say to me, "Ella, I can't find my voice when I'm trying to flesh out this piece." I hear it all the time and they sound so broken. And I don't care if you're writing fiction or nonfiction, you are bleeding onto the page. You're putting yourself in that piece. And to tie in with what you're saying, if you are not able to tell yourself the truth of yourself, then it is almost impossible to create fiction that will resonate authentically.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I know, listen, I've written before, not fully understanding the power of my voice because it's an evolution, right? And I'm still learning that. It's not a destination. It's opening ourselves up to live in that power. And as we know more about the power of our voices, then our voices change. Our voices become more powerful. I look back at the first book I wrote and published in 2008. I look back at that work and I look back at the last book I wrote, The Voice Positioning System, worlds apart. Why?
Yes.
Because my voice changed over time. And so it's not about arriving at this one voice and we stop there. It's
Right.
recognizing that we are on this voice journey and to stand in power and purpose as we evolve in that journey. Does that make sense?
We're going to take a small break, but Ella and Dr. Katrina will be back to finish this discussion of voice positioning and influence.
Sometimes we have to be broken before we are able to see the beauty of our light reflected in the mirrors of our soul. Pick up Ella Shawn's Broken Souls series wherever you shop for your favorite book. Available on Amazon, Nook, iBook, and Kobo.
Welcome back to the second half of Black Writer Therapy with host and unlicensed therapist Ella Shawn and her esteemed guest, Dr. Katrina Hutchins. And now, back to this session of Black Writer Therapy on the Alive Podcast Network.
Yeah, because I think once people find this voice and they find this space where they feel empowered, then they're like, oh no, cannot move from this place. I am going to be a tree planted by the water because this is good. But then you're just stuck and you're not growing and you're not evolving.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I love what you just said. So healthy to stay in that one place where you kind of stay stuck in voice. That doesn't serve you well either. No. But being open to the evolution. So many things inform the power of your voice. I've learned in this season of my life how adversity has informed my voice power. Walking adversity has presented a gift of healing that is informing my voice power in this season of my life.
That's the beauty of it, I think, is that it doesn't matter where you are, what you've accomplished, how old you are. None of that is a prerequisite for where your voice can go. It's infinite in that respect, the growth and the ability to build more power, to create more power, or to step into more power as your voice grows, I think is what I want to say.
Absolutely. And our voices do grow. We grow in power, right? We grow in purpose. We grow in positioning. And so I love that you used grow because it's a maturing process. Yeah.
That's it. That was the word I think I was trying to find. But growth, mature. Yeah, that's it. Okay. You've given me and our listeners like a crazy amount of stuff to think about and consider if you don't have Dr. Katrina's book.
The Voice Positioning System, 7 Ways to Harness Your Power and Master Your Influence.
You don't have this book, you need to step on over to Amazon and get this book because for me, this is almost like writing craft book. And I I don't like writing craft books, Dr. Katrina. They tend to bore me, but I read them because you have to study your craft. This feels like it will not only help me position myself and my voice as a woman, as a leader, all the hats that I am wearing right now, but feels like it will help position my writer's voice in a powerful space as well. And that is, I think, invaluable. So writers, go out here, get the book, because I think it will do more for your writing. So we are moving into our rapid question round, rapid Q&A. So you don't have to think a lot about it. Just come off the top. And there are 5 questions, unless I want to speak for all the nosy listeners. And then there may be a few more. So we'll see. Okay. You ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. What is your personal definition of power?
My personal definition of power is the ability to bounce back from any setback and do it unapologetically and better than you were before you got knocked down.
Oh, I'm loving it. And you gave my buzzword unapologetically. That is all we're about here. Who is a woman whose voice has profoundly impacted yours?
My mom's voice, not necessarily her 7%, but definitely her 93% and what she modeled and how I still hold what she modeled so dear and near to my heart.
Yes. Yes, indeed. That's beautiful. What's one leadership trait you think every woman needs to cultivate?
Authenticity, to be an authentic leader, to know who you are and be true to what you know.
Wow. What's the most rewarding part of running? And I didn't even mention this, but your voice leadership camp.
Because I get to be a part of informing the voices of the next generation of leaders and disrupting voice dysfunction while they're little people so that they don't grow up carrying the same burdens and perpetuating voice trauma for generations to come.
I wish that I could use this video. You lit up like a Christmas tree when I said voice leadership camp. Like, that's where the passion is right there. Like, oh my word. Okay. I love that. I love that for you. Okay. Number 5. I didn't get really nosy. What's your favorite inspirational book or resource?
My favorite inspirational book is I Surrender All by Priscilla Shirer. It is really a book about surrendering and recognizing just how much we are not in control, so that we should just surrender, right?
That sounds really easy when you hear people say, just surrender. It sounds like the easiest thing in the world to do. And yet it is the thing that we struggle against the most. It's just letting go, surrendering, allowing things to flow and moving with it. It sounds so perfect, right? It sounds like a deep breath.
It does, but it is hard because we live in a world that tells us the opposite of surrendering all, that we should be in control and we should hold on.
That is one of the words I have been working to get out of my vocabulary, should, because it becomes, it's like that got you, right? Yes, that word now becomes should. It makes you, well, you should be, which says that whatever you're doing isn't right. It's not enough. And so I have really been working on getting that word out of my vocabulary.
Very good.
We're moving along and we're in my favorite part of the show, which is the audacity of Black women writers. Not that we have to show anyone how great we are and why this audacity allows us to go into the world and thrive and lift people up and empower people, even though there's not many folk out there lifting and empowering us. And yet we do all these things. Like, that audacity is something I love talking about, something that I love having our writers share. Do you have the capacity to play a game with me?
Sure. I'm up for the challenge.
So I only need you to pick a number between 1 and 10.
Okay. 8.
You know what? My last guest chose 8.
Number of new beginnings.
There's the infinity aspect of it. There's
Yeah.
all kinds of things going on with 8. Okay. And now I just need you to choose a letter from the word audacity.
A.
These are my little cards. Can you tell I taught school?
You're so creative. I love it.
So your word then is ambition. And this is so apropos that you chose 8 because the topic is power and influence. Oh, I know. You did good. The whole point of this is to get a little flash fiction story from you. A made up story using the word ambition at least once.
Okay.
And on the topic of power and influence.
Okay.
I have to pull out my timer.
How much time do I have?
You get 5 minutes. Your story does not have to be 5 minutes at all. You get up to 5 minutes.
So ambition, my words are ambition, power,
and influence. The story has to be about power and influence.
Okay. All right. Let's see. This is how I used to start stories when I read to little people. Once upon a time,
I love it.
in a faraway land is how I always started. But so once upon a time in a faraway land, there lived 2 women who were very friendly and sisterly toward each other. And one of the women grew up to believe that she could go out and conquer so many things in the world. And then the other woman she grew up to believe that she could accomplish nothing in the world, that nothing was going to go her way, that she had no power to do anything meaningful in the world. And so they spent a lot of time going back and forth with each other until one day, the one woman decided, I'm going to have to leave this conversation and take flight and go into the world because I have ambitions that I need to satisfy. I have visions that I've seen in my mind that I want to become my reality. I have stories that I know that are still untold. I have people that I know that there is something in me that can influence them. But sister, before I leave, I want to ask you to just come with me. Come with me on that journey. And the other woman said, I'm sorry, but I can't. I don't see what you see. I don't feel what you feel. I don't have the power that you're telling me you have. I don't feel that I'm enough to influence anyone, to influence anything. And so with great sadness, the one woman departed and she left the other sister where she was. She left the other woman. Even with great trepidation in her heart, she still knew that she had to move. So she went out into the world with this great ambition, fully embracing her power to set out to influence others with this thing that she believed that she had on the inside of her, her light and her life that she believed that she was called to give to the world. And with great success, she did exactly that. She was ambitious and she met every ambition. She was powerful and she stood in that power. And then she was also influential. She made a difference in the lives of so many others. And one day, she was on this TV show that she had dreamt about all of her life. Here she was with the opportunity to be on the show. And so she's on the show. She's shining brightly. She has met this ambition, living in her power, influencing. And who sees her on the TV but the sister that was left behind all those years ago. So she wraps up the set. She wraps up being on this television show, and she gets a phone call from the woman that was left behind. And she says, I saw your ambition and I saw that you met it. I saw your power and I see you standing in it. I saw your influence and I see what is the difference you've made. Can I come to where you are? And she took flight, flew to where the other woman was, and she allowed the other woman to pour all of what she desired to pour in her. And that one woman now lives in her ambition, fully in her power, and she's influencing those around her. And they are living happily ever after. The end.
Oh my word, that was so awesome. You are a natural storyteller.
Oh my goodness, that was so much fun. I had a blast doing that. Thank you.
Oh my God, it was so good. Dr. Katrina, it was so good. Did you see my face? I'm all in it. You were like, and guess who saw her? I'm like, the sister. And then she said she wanted to come. I almost started crying. I was like, no, don't tear up. Don't do that. Don't do that. Okay. Oh my goodness. That was amazing.
Thank you. That was so much fun.
Love that. I feel so inspired.
I love it.
So I want you to please tell everyone who's listening anything that's coming up with you, how they can get in touch with you, all the things that you want them to know. And of course, I'll put all of your information in the show notes, but just let them know what's happening with you and how to get in touch with you.
Thank you so much for this invitation. It's been a joy being on your proverbial couch. I appreciate this opportunity and all you're doing to position your voice in powerful ways, mastering your influence and touching the lives of others. Thank you for how you show up in the world. Others can find me on social media. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Facebook. My book is on Amazon. I have several books on Amazon under Katrina Hutchins. If you look there, you can visit my bookstore that's on Amazon. And then you can reach me on my website at resourcesolutions.com. That's RE-sourcesolutions.com. Just don't forget the dash. You can see some of the other work I'm doing with organizations, personal and executive coaching.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. I cannot say enough how important it is to get this book, regardless of if you're getting it as a writing craft book or the self-help book. Dr. Katrina, it's been such a pleasure to have you on the show. You have an open invitation anytime you want to come back.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Black Writer Therapy, where we amplify and celebrate the voices of unapologetic Black women writers. We're proud to be part of the Alive Podcast Network. Be sure to tap into the only Black woman-owned podcast network with its very own proprietary platform and app. When you download the Tap In app, you gain access to nearly 100 Black creative voices. To support Black Writer Therapy, subscribe and choose me as your favorite podcast host. 50% of your subscription fee goes directly to this show and allows me to continue to bring you quality content like this. Until next time, remember, be kindest to yourself first, always, and in all ways. I am Ella Shawn, your host for Black Writer Therapy Podcast.